Hi, everybody. This is crazy. So it's really wonderful to see all your faces, even covered in masks. But yeah, let's go. Sorry, I'm new here. Anyways, I'm Lindsay Thompson. I work at Insomniac Games in Los Angeles, California, and I want to thank everybody for coming today to hear about the animated world of Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. I had the great honor of being a senior cinematic animator from the very beginning of production. I got to work side by side with my lead, Kevin Groh, animating on and also supervising our cinematic team for this amazing once-in-a-lifetime project. So I want to give a little bit of a background on my experience in animation and how I got where I am today. I have been animating in film and video games for about 15 years. I went to Otis College of Art and Design, where I studied 3D animation. After graduating, I got hired at Rhythm and Hues in the apprenticeship program, where I worked on my first film, Alvin and the Chipmunks, which as an 80s baby was very, very exciting for me. After that, I worked on The Incredible Hulk and a few other movies, before getting hired at Weta Digital in New Zealand. I worked on Avatar while I was in New Zealand, which was a really fun opportunity to animate Tails. And then on to Legend of the Guardians in Sydney, Australia at Animal Logic. I continued to hop around the world a bit. I actually ended up back here in San Francisco at Industrial Light and Magic, where I worked on Avengers and Transformers 3. One of them. It was one of the better ones, I think. A quick stint at Disney Animation, where I worked on Wreck-It Ralph, which I fully consider my entry to video game animation. I got to animate a lot of really cool, different styled animated characters, and even like Sonic the Hedgehog in a Disney movie, which was totally weird, and that was really cool. I went up to Vancouver, Canada for one more final project, and I knew I was really ready to move on to something different. I reached out to a former teacher who was actually working at Insomniac Games and took a big leap and applied, and I've now been at Insomniac Games for the last 9 years. So my first project was Sunset Overdrive, and this was a really awesome start to get into video games. I was working on the cinematics, and I even got the opportunity to do a little bit of voiceover work. So you can find me in the game somewhere. I can tell you about that later. It's a little not safe for work what I ended up doing in that game. So next, I got to work on Ratchet and Clank PS4, which was very exciting for me because that was the game that really inspired me over the years to keep Insomniac always in the back of my mind as if I ever worked in video games, that is where I want to work. On that game, I got to actually create, direct, do the cinematography for our first shipped cinematic, and that was such a huge career highlight for me. That was such a change from coming from film, getting to create the entire scene from scratch, which I think is one of the most incredible benefits of doing animation in games as opposed to film. So after that, I worked on Spider-Man PS4. I was on the open world team, tried something different, and then finally to Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which we were so excited to do. In this talk, I'm going to talk you guys through the process of our cinematic and gameplay animation. I'll discuss some of the processes and inspiration behind the wide variety of animation, how we worked with other departments, and how we took on such an ambitious project. So first up, let's discuss cinematics. So cinematics are non-playable cutscenes in our game. These are nearly identical in process to how we create scenes for film or television. They're used for spots of emotional storytelling, high action transitions, or spectacle moments. We knew starting out in this game, we wanted to create cinematics that rivaled any feature animated movie. We knew with the PS5 that we were really going to get a chance to test out how far we could really push the quality of our work. So cines are typically limited to locked cameras and that the player cannot control, and there's more than one way that we applied them in our game. So to start, there's two main types of cinematics in our game. There's cinematic transitions and cinematic cutscenes. So these differ in length and content. Transitions are mostly interstitial, big exciting moments, whereas cutscenes can be any length really and typically help tell the story. As you can see here, we employ the use of a cinematic as an exciting transition moment with a bit of spectacle that otherwise may not have had as large of an impact within the game camera. We're able to transition a character from one area of gameplay to another with ease. Our cinematic cutscenes, we're able to tell a much deeper story, show the character's emotions and thoughts in a much more intimate way, or sometimes just like blow stuff up and do crazy things. So first off, cinematic transitions. Our game engine technology on the PS5 allowed us to create seamless weaving from gameplay to cinematic and back again. So you can go through combat and running through a chaotic environment to a spectacle cinematic moment in an instant. This helped us significantly with world building and fluid storytelling. We can highlight a mechanic or an environment while keeping the pace up in gameplay. These are the ones that you almost feel more than you notice and see, and the goal is just not to stop the player for very long. And there's just so many cool things in this game. So cinematic cutscenes, on the other hand, are where we slow down, which is sometimes only metaphorically or literally, to highlight a major moment in the game. This is the heart of our story and the height of our action. So how do you build a cinematic? How do we take it from something that's rudimentary and representative to something polished and final? I'm going to share with you here, this is an example of a scene that I was lucky enough to get to previs the entire scene, as well as animate a large chunk of it myself all the way to final. So I consider this, again, to be one of the biggest perks in working in game development on a cinematic team. You get the chance to be a director and a cinematographer and an animator, and cinematic building is really one of the most rewarding aspects of our job. So first off, we start with the script. We read a script and talk to the narrative team about the plot, what we want to achieve with the scene, what we want to get across. During Rift Apart, we worked really closely with our writing team. We actually, when we were still in the studio, I sat back to back with one of our writers, who was also born in Jupiter, Florida, and it was the weirdest thing ever. So oftentimes in the past, I've worked at plenty of places where these two departments are kept on an island. They're separated, the writer's in their own creative hole, and then once it gets to animation, we're just building this thing. Working back and forth through some really big, difficult scenes, this helped us write the best story. It helped us create the best visuals while remaining friendly to the budget. In our finale of our game, we got a big team together in a group chat, and we said, how are we going to do this? How are we going to show it? How can we fit this into the budget, but also make it cool? And they were just happy to give and take with us. We knew how things are made. They knew how to tell that story. But yeah, so once we get the script, we move on to previs. We were fortunate to be able to previs most, if not all, of our cinematics in Rift Apart. So this would basically be taking a really rough pass after reading the script, doing a quick pass on cameras, editing, staging, and timing. This laid the groundwork for our animators to focus on creating their performances. What you see here is a bit of a previs plus. It's kind of a hybrid between blocking and previs. A lot of times, even in previs, you won't show the character popping from pose to pose. They'd just be sliding into their positions. So for this one, Rivet just won the part that she needs to fix Clank's communicator, and she's gloating about it, and so that was kind of the initial main thing of her walking in is she's being a little bit of a jerk about it. Not a jerk, she's just proud. So after the previs process, we'll start gathering assets to set up the animator with a scene to begin working on. We'll make sure they have the set, the actors, props, anything that they're going to interact with available to them to block everything out. In Rift Apart, we keyframed nearly everything, so our scenes were built from the ground up. This differs from a game more like Spider-Man, where a lot of the time we're capturing motion capture data and doing more human-type characters. This game was so full of non-human characters that we were kind of forced to animate everything, which doesn't really bother an animator. So scenes begin with a kickoff and performance discussion. We'll discuss acting choices and emphasis on getting the best performance possible. Animators would show an initial pass for sign-off, and I consider this the most creative process. This is when our animators are empowered to make creative choice at this stage. Oops, oh no, what have I done? Hold on. Okay, so this brings us to our polish stage. So this is once the performance and acting choices are approved, and we can really start putting in extra time to all the ears and tails and props and bits and bobs and all that stuff. This is the stage where we really wanted to push our work to film quality. Our animators really got to dig into our incredible facial rigs, and we had amazing facial blend shapes that allowed our animators to create the most expressive performances that we had ever created in a Ratchet game. But of course, this is not the final work that goes into making our scenes film quality. Final lighting, effects, audio, environment, secondary cloth, hair simulation, they all go into making these scenes feel so cinematic. You can see in the background, in our levels, they're filled out with vignettes and NPCs created by our gameplay animation team. This particular level in the game actually has a lot of really fun Easter eggs, so I recommend you play it and you walk around and wander and dance and all the things that you can do in there. So clearly we would be not nothing, but not much without our other departments. We wouldn't have a game. Effects, lighting, fur tech, rain, wet fur, atmosphere, sound, music, it all goes into grounding us into the world of Rift Apart. So another huge part of what made this game so special for many of us was getting to craft and develop our newest hero, Rivet. Rivet was a dream come true for the team and for me personally. It was an opportunity to create a new hero from one that we'd already known for so many years. So when we started to do some development work on our character, we started with, who is she? As you can see, early in production, we really explored the possibilities of who she could be. We thought about strong, quirky characters that have inspired us throughout our lives. We wanted her to be tough and strong. She had a different background than Ratchet, but who they are at the core remains the same. We wanted them to be alike, but different. In thinking of her backstory, Rivet, unlike Ratchet, has been on her own for her whole life. She never had a best friend like Clank to help her through her struggles. We asked, what has her life as a lone wolf in a dangerous world made her into? Who is she at her heart? Has her time alone made her a bit awkward when she finally gets the chance to interact socially? These were all questions that we asked ourselves before going into full production to make sure our animators had a real good grasp on how she would behave in certain situations. At her heart, she's kind, determined, resourceful, but always level-headed. She'll take an enemy down with a smile on her face, knowing that they're no match for her strength and wit. As we would be passing her off to many different animators to work on, it was crucial that we figured this stuff out, and we also made a concerted effort to figure out who she isn't. So despite her tough exterior and perceived coolness, she's never cynical, dark, or cruel. Sure, she may not know the best way to act in a social situation, but she sure as hell isn't shy. She's on a mission for good. So shown here, we have some early concept character art to show off the various aspects of her personality. I volunteered myself early on to help figure her out. So when I first saw these concepts, I quickly wanted to dig into an early rig that we had of her face and see how far we could push her expression and appeal. So this is my test that I did here. Fortunately for us, we had amazing character artists and rigging team to help facilitate this reality for us. These were very early 3D pose tests that that I created to show the team that we would be able to embody the appeal that we see in the best feature films. I was then able to create a pose library for our animation team from these poses. And obviously each scene and facial performance was ultimately handcrafted and keyframed. But these came in great handy for previs process. When we were trying to sell an idea of what was happening in the scene, sometimes that blank default face doesn't quite go all the way. And this was a quick tool for our animators to be able to do that. This also helped with keeping our characters on model. That's a term that definitely comes from the 2D world, where they would create character sheets showing what the character looked like on model, and otherwise you would push it too far and it would start not to look like our character. So these guides were really helpful for the team as well. So it was really important that we got enough early development time in to capture her spirit, and as we were doing this work, we really knew that we were onto something really wonderful. Rivet's an important character to so many of us at Insomniac, and our goal was to do her justice. And just as an aside, she was my favorite part of game development on this project, and actually my favorite character to animate in the entire 15 years I've worked on anything. And I've worked on a lot of really cool stuff, but she's amazing. A lot of love really went into her, and hold on, sorry. Anyway, it's just been really exciting to see all the community response to the character. We thought that we had something great, and everything since then has just really backed that up for us, and it feels really wonderful. So next up, I want to speak about our gameplay animation team and the incredible work they put into making this entire game feel so alive. So the first stage of any game feature or animation is concepting it out. All animation starts off from an idea. At the beginning, we would concept and explore what exactly we wanted to focus on with our heroes, enemies, and living world actors. Who they were, what type of environment they lived in, or why they were the way they are. We had the opportunity on this project to create the most unique and varied cast of characters we have ever put into a game before. And the PS5 simply begged us to keep adding more. One of the main starting ideas we had was, how can we make gameplay and combat even more awesome? We had so many previous games to build off, but we knew that we were going to have an opportunity to push it much further. Variety, personality, and humor were key pillars of our production. So, first up, we have crowds and living world. We were looking to create moments in the game that not only made the world feel alive, but also creating moments that technically could just happen if the world existed and the player wasn't even watching. Sort of like the day-to-day was still happening regardless if the player chose to look at it or not. We wanted moments in the game where you could see a reaction and recovery happening in real time, like after a fight broke out between a hero and an enemy, or if the hero roamed around the world, how would the civilians or NPCs react around them? We wanted our worlds to feel very lived in. So in this clip, we're in Sargasso, which is our lush, wild planet, and this moment with the dinosaur was created as a moment that you may or may not see if you don't pan that camera up while you're walking through that section of the game. But it's part of what makes every corner of this game so special. This attention to detail was something that we insisted on getting in each level and each planet of our game. So we even have like the Speedles and Flyers that are roaming around freely in this world. These ambient actors exist with their own unique animation. We worked with design, environment, and rigging to make sure that all of these actors were placed and integrated into their own unique spaces. In our Nefarious City mission, we made good use of our buddy follow mechanic as a tutorial tool, as well as a storytelling and visual experience. Animation, along with our programming team, was able to create this super successful gameplay experience that educated the player while still making them feel very empowered with traversal. So another aspect that we wanted to improve upon in our next-gen Ratchet and Clank game was making smarter and more interactive NPCs. We built out more robust NPCs with more animations so that the reactions could be specific to any enemy type or direction that they're moving. Pathing was improved as well as variety. And of course, we were also able to include some really fun standalone vignettes for more life. Another really cool thing that we introduced in Rift Apart was the Speedle. This was a totally new mechanic for us at Insomniac. This feature was really fun to iterate on, and just exactly how fast this thing could move, how Rivet held on while she was riding, how she made it go faster. As it's less frequently used as a mechanic in the game, we also were able to leverage these characters for inside of our pocket dimension puzzle challenges. You'll notice the blurred shape on the legs when it's going full speed, and we actually used blurred texture cards animated to get that rapid looking effect on the legs. I love all the details that were added as well to Rivet when she's going at such high speeds. All the fluttery ears and tail and fur, all of that stuff goes into like feeling the speed. So moving on to our enemies. Our team initially focused on how we can make enemy interacts engaging as well as immersive. We wanted each faction to have their own personality as well as their own attack styles that felt unique to each character. Whether it was the Goons for Less faction or the Nefarious Bot enemies, our team made sure that their personalities came to life through movement. So we have 3 main types of enemies in Rift Apart. So first off, we have our popcorn enemies. And these are our fun little one-hit kill guys, like our sand sharks or our toads. Attacks cause damage quickly, especially when they swarm the player. So we include these types of enemies because it's important to maintain a variety during combat for the best possible feel. These were some of the less complex to create animation for, as they lacked any sort of stun or stagger. But it's always fun to be able to amp up these really over-the-top deaths for these one-hit kill guys, because that's pretty much all they do is die. So they had much smaller anim sets than our main enemy factions. So our enemy factions in Rift Apart consisted of 3 different types. We had the Goons for Less, who were working for Nefarious. We had the Pirate Robots, and we had the Nefarious Troopers. So we made a concerted effort to differentiate the style and personality of each faction. For the Goons for Less, we went for a total gym bro who always skips leg day and never misses an arm day. We really wanted to make a leg day Goon for Less, but we just didn't have time. Just giant legs. So pirate factions are our most over-the-top and cartoony faction. They have tons of squash and stretch. They are like our classic old school animation. It was so much fun to work on these guys. And there's actually some pretty great smear frames in some of their animations if you use that photo mode really well. Nefarious Troopers are also really over the top. They had a much different type of traversal that ranged from hovering to octopus-style mech legs. Personality-wise, what they lack in brains, they make up for in overconfidence. So the enemy factions had a much greater sized anim set than our popcorn enemies. So for example, if you would hit them from below, the reaction would be like a stumble. Or if you hit them from the side, you would actually feel them stumble or fall left or right, back. All of these animations were keyframed, and each has their own flair when it comes to reacts. From defining runs and walks, attacks and reacts, we got to add a lot of squash and stretch to our anims, and the team had a particularly fun time with all the death animations. You can also see how much work went into all these enemies due to the fact that we have so many custom weapons in the game that will stun or kill differently. And these aren't really your typical shooter weapons. I wish I could share some of the weapon pitches that didn't make the cut into the game. The best thing about working on a game like Rift Apart is thinking up something like a topiary gun that would transform your enemy into a topiary bush, and then adding some sprinklers to water it, and then adding some flowers growing out of it, and then some butterflies. And how does the enemy bust out of it? All this stuff, this stuff was pitched by our animators, and it's A Rift Apart game is so fun because if you've played them, you know the guns are crazy. It's as fun as it looks, So finally, we had our boss enemies to tackle. So our bosses in the game range from a mechanical flying caterpillar to a giant robot Emperor Nefarious who uses rifts to shove his laser-shooting giant head at the player. Our small but mighty boss team created such exciting, unique player experiences that stood alone, completely outside of regular enemy combat. This one in particular is my favorite. Working on our Rift functionality, our team made one of the most unique gameplay experiences I know that I've had. And like, seriously, how fun is that? It's so cool. My jaw dropped the first time that I saw it. I was like, what? I didn't even know we had a giant nefarious bot. So last but not least, we have our heroes. In focusing on gameplay for both heroes, it meant refining the base that was there with Ratchet and building on it to create Rivet. We wanted to make sure that these two heroes could be told apart in their own distinct way. We focused on a ton of new mechanics and platforming that felt fun and relevant to the world of Rift Apart, and created some distinct personality idols for both Ratchet and Rivet. This meant that for active or even still moments, we got to instill personal touches for both characters. And of course, we also had our Clank and Glitch, rounding out some secondary hero puzzle missions as well. So with two heroes in our game, we wanted to make sure that each one felt unique while still being able to maintain some economy of reusing assets. And if anybody says that they don't reuse assets, I know you guys know. This is a great way to build off something tried and true that leaves room to embellish and improve. We were able to differentiate them with unique idols and idiosyncrasies, as well as their own unique weapon of choice, hammer versus wrench. Based on our heroes traveling to different planets throughout the game, they also picked up some of their own unique mechanics. So here are some examples of personalized traversal and some idle flair. Rivet was able to use the Speedle mechanic, while Ratchet got his own hover boots, which are so fun, by the way. So what were our main challenges in this project? The PS5 really helped us many ways, but it also set up some huge challenges. How could we best take advantage of the incredible speed that we were now afforded? From this, we developed things like the Rift tether mechanic and our epic fixer battle on the grind rails. We were also able to have so many more characters and things moving on screen at the same time. So this forced us to create some of the greatest variety in character animation that we've ever put into a game. So another snag that was discovering that those real-time reflections turned our sweet little Clank's head into one big reflective ball. So we noticed, looking back at some of our scenes finally in Engine, that he was reflecting some parts of himself off camera that were not animated, and mainly in cinematics, obviously. So we had to hop back in into quite a few scenes and make sure that there was motion happening that you could see reflected on the underside of his chin. So the sheer massive scale of this game was just a huge challenge. We had heroes, enemies, NPCs, creatures, fauna, spacecraft, sheep, you name it. It was a lot. So how did we get it done? Lots of ways. We keyframed a ton of this animation to keep that fun style of Ratchet and Clank. But we did use mocap in instances where it made sense to keep our teams moving fast. Enemies, NPCs, and even heroes benefited from this from time to time. Partnering with an amazing outsourcing team at VASG to work hand in hand with our cinematic animation team. So one of the best benefits of working during the pandemic was kind of the level playing field of what Zoom did for teams, especially when everybody was working in different spots. It really felt like we were one team. I worked with our VASG team all week, every week, we were one, and it was really, I'm so grateful to work with them. They did such an amazing job. And then finally, quick iteration and quick implementation. Not being afraid to try something fun, and working cross-departmentally to get our craziest ideas actually in the game. I cannot tell you how many things in this game somebody worked at their desk, made something funny, sent it to the team, and we're like, okay, it's going into the game. How do we get this into the game? There's a lot of that. So I hope you enjoyed hearing a bit about our animation team and our experience on Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. I could not be more proud of a project. It was such a joy every day to think of something crazy, pitch it, and actually put it in the game. And I want to give another shout out to our incredible team at Insomniac and our partners at VASG for taking home the coveted Annie Award for Outstanding Game Animation just a couple weeks ago. I'm just so proud of them. This team could not have deserved it more, and I'm truly thankful to have been a part of it. So thank you. That's my talk. So if anybody has any questions, I think there's some microphones. I'm just gonna dance until somebody has a question. Yay.
Hey, Lindsay.
Hi.
Oh, wow. That's really good.
Yeah.
Great talk. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the rigs and the squash and stretch.
Yes.
If there's anything special that you were doing, if there was any tests that you had to do, and if you worked with the rigging team to try and find the best sort of process and pipeline?
Yeah, he's basically asking about the squash and stretch for the team, if there was anything special that we had to work on with rigging to really get this stuff working.
Yeah.
We had a rigging team of 3 people for the whole game. We may have had an intern come through here and there, and our interns at Insomniac are amazing, and they do work on the games, and it's awesome. So our team was small but mighty, and we would typically send them case-by-case requests. Like, I really need to be able to stretch these arms, and we'd send them a little note in a Jira. And then sometimes they go, oh, we can't do that. But most of the time, they were able to go in and make sure that it worked for us. We have never had as many different rigs in a game, because you'll know, working on teams, you typically have shared rigs for certain enemy types, even if their mesh is different. There's every size and shape here. So it was definitely the animation team getting creative. We definitely broke stuff. We're just breaking things. It looks fancy, but yeah, we're just pulling things off their IK and all that stuff. But the rigging team really came through and made sure that we had the ability to scale things when we had that request. And that back and forth was also something that was rapid and awesome for us to be able to do our job.
Cool. Thank you very much. Awesome talk.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
So I was wondering if the team always knew that mocap was going to be a part of the process, or if you always knew keyframe was going to be a part of the process, or if realizing how many different moving characters you can now have on the screen sort of made that a reality.
I think it's a little of everything. We certainly, going into Ratchet and Clank, that is a very keyframe heavy project. That always has been that way. It's always been super stylized. If you look at the old games, they're really over the top. Like, we've definitely grounded it back a bit in certain aspects. So keyframe was always on the table. Mocap was something that clearly we had become more and more familiar with over the years. Obviously, Insomniac has used mocap for Sunset Overdrive, for Resistance, for our Spider-Man games. It's something that we're familiar with, so we have that already built into our team, knowing how to use that. So when we had certain scenes that we knew this does not need to be over the top, none of us were afraid to take advantage of that. I would say we had a few specific shoots for the game. And it was really the gameplay team more that was using it. I mean, I'm trying to recall many, if any, cinematics actually used mocap. It's possible. I don't want to say that we didn't, and someone's like, hey, I did. But yeah, it came out of doing things smarter, not harder. So it works where it works, and then there was other places you throw a little bit of mocap on like a weird little alien character, and you're like, that looks like a guy in a suit, you know? So it was really taking advantage of all the tools we had to make the best animation.
Cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, hello.
Hi.
I wanted to know for the hairs and the tail, did you use some physics, or it's all keyframed for this part?
We animated the ears and tails.
Okay.
Yes. I think there were tests done, and I think animators, it's sometimes, we have tools that help us kind of generate stuff like that. But it's still kind of keyframe animated. I don't know that much was simmed. I don't want to say, hey, I simmed all those ears. No, but at least on our team in cinematics, yeah, we animated them.
Okay.
All those ears and tails, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Lindsay. Fantastic talk.
Thank you.
Cinematic transitions are deceptively complex. And I was curious if you could talk a little bit about how Insomniac balanced that difficulty between level design changing and gameplay beats changing and lerping between player-controlled character and camera and cinematic camera, and just how you dealt with all. Okay, yeah.
Yes,
you know where I'm coming from.
Yes, I hear you. Man, it was a lot. That's where the teamwork really comes into play. That is where you're saying all of our all of our problems. Yes, they are deceptively difficult, and I would say they're much more difficult than putting a cutscene in. While we do have, we've learned a lot on our other games, in Spider-Man and beyond, of getting things going from cinematic back to seamless gameplay. We've done a ton of that already in our Miles game, Spider-Man, and that was something that we actively wanted to do in Rift Apart, where these transitions were seamless. So we did get a lot more practice on our big scenes, and that did help us with our action scenes, but yes, those changed a lot. And those are those scenes that you start at the beginning of production, and you're still finishing them at the end because, oh no, the level design changed, the beats changed. It's building a really good relationship with your designer on your mission, and quick, rapid iteration. So, and that goes to getting things in actually as early as possible, because that's how you develop, that's how you figure out these issues. If we were to animate our beautiful little cinematic transition moments and hang on to them and keep them close, that was a big lesson for me too, getting into game dev. I worked on film where you animate your perfect little spot and then turn it into something, and never see it again. So it's much more collaborative. It is hard, but we care deeply about that transition feeling good, and games are about feel. So yeah, I can't give you too much technical information because I'm I don't know, someone who's smarter than me makes it work.
That's fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Lindsay, Xavier from Free Agents. We work with a lot of production companies.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot of cinematics with gaming companies. With timing, and you touched upon this a little bit, with timing getting shorter in terms of the ability to really finesse the animation and the process,
Yeah.
What are you working with internally with those timeframes when you're looking at creating these cinematics? You obviously have a toolkit and a lot of the shading, a lot of the designs, a lot of the animation already from the in-house team. Mm-hmm. When you're being asked and tasked with creating these narrative cinematics, what's the timeframes that you guys are working with internally?
Okay, his question, sorry, I have not been repeating these questions for the camera, but he's asking about the kind of the timeline for cinematic creation and what kind of deadlines and timelines we're working on creating these.
Correct.
They're quick, and that was another rude awakening coming from film to games. Sometimes these games, and you guys know, we're making like 2 or 3 feature films worth of cinematics. These are 3 hours of cinematic. Nah, that's a lot. But we're making a ton, and so we're on a very quick schedule, and we typically have smaller teams. And I know that sometimes that lends itself to maybe less polished animation. But I would say that our scenes in Rift Apart were anywhere, you would have maybe a week or 2 to previs the scene out. And then we would go anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks. Sometimes they'd go longer on really big, complex, multi-character action scenes. And that goes to is mocap going to help us here? All these background characters, is it going to be helpful if I can fill these people out with animation rather than animating like a weight shift on an NPC, which is so hard? Yeah. Definitely faster than film.
Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, we are on rapid schedules, and we're always trying to figure out what's going to help us here once this gets in lighting, and we always want to get it in as soon as possible because we want to start problem solving or seeing what environmental aspects are going to cause us trouble as soon as possible. So in the previs stage, we try to get it exported into the game looking really rough, and then working on those problems right away. So it's fast. It's very fast iteration, and the team is amazing. And yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, that was a great talk. You said something I really empathize with, which is, remote work really leveled the playing field. You get to work with, your outsourcers. And I was curious if that changed the way you defined how something was done. When did you determine something was finished when you had that much more cross-collaboration between teams? Like, did that change your approach at all, or?
So he's asking, did the kind of level playing field of Zoom affect how we determine when things were finished because we had so much more communication? I will say that I think it sped the process up because, again, it felt like we weren't kept on separate islands. We were all in this Zoom meeting. There wasn't like, well, the outsourcing team's going to show up on the camera on the wall, and we're all here in person as a team. We were all together, it feels like the pandemic really upped our ability to be more available for quick communication because there was no tapping somebody on the shoulder, so you had to be a lot more cognizant of your presence online and your availability. That said, I'm not sure how much it affected how far we would push things. We still always have budgets and timelines and how much time we can put into something. And we try to make the best choices. There are times when you're like, well, we may need to sacrifice a little bit here, but as long as this part of it's looking good, it's going to feel good. So that really came down to some of the decisions.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, when it comes to building a scene and you've got your previs stage and at some points you're going to be adding in all your background assets and your characters and you've got a team of people who are working individually, how do you find yourself coming together with all these assets that synergize well instead of just having a really busy scene that's kind of got a bit of a visual fatigue to it? Or is that all kind of sorted out previously, blocking out before you start adding everything together?
That's a good question. She's asking about how do we work with all these different teams to make sure that like all the gameplay teams and everybody's placing their own stuff in the level and making that not some kind of visual fatigue of too much stuff. How do we coordinate all of that? That goes to getting this stuff in game as soon as possible. So when it comes to cinematics, we definitely do drive the visuals, and oftentimes there's plenty of times in a lot of the games that we've worked on where I need to show an establishing shot of this, and I need this person to show up and walk in here and be here. But there is a table right in the way. Can you please take this table out of this scene? And environment's usually like, yes, we can. And we're like, thank you. So, but then every now and then you find out this table is critical to gameplay. And we go, oh, okay, so then we have to adjust. So it's really, I will say that all of the teams at the studio are typically very, very nice to us cinematic animators in, can we make sure, what's really cool is that you'll be like, this is what's happening in this scene, and this is actually a really emotional moment. Is there any way we can make sure that there's a light highlighting this thing? And lighting's like, cool, thank you for telling me that. Yes, I'll make sure that that's lit. I'll make sure that that is important in this scene. So we are working together with every department to do this visual storytelling. And then going to put it in game, a lot of that stuff you saw in that scene that I was animating is done by gameplay animation, and that is what is playing. That's all happening real time in the game, and then once we return to gameplay, they're all there. So every now and then, we're like, so we did that scene, and that scene ends up being a little bit emotional. That's the first time she talks to Ratchet, all this stuff. And then we noticed in the background that there's like one of the Morts like riding a bull. And it was like, when we first shot it with our cameras, we were like, oh, that doesn't feel right. But we couldn't really take the Mort out of the bull because when you go back, he's riding it, and we didn't create animations of him jumping off and jumping back on. So we're gonna take that camera and make sure that we can't see him during this really emotional part of the game. So it's totally just constant collaboration.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Hi.
Just real quick, I'm curious, in the early level design process, when we're building a level, we have lots and lots of cinematics that need to go in.
Yeah.
And what we usually have in the beginning is, I guess, kind of a black screen with text that describes what's supposed to happen here. Do you guys do the same thing when you're stubbing in these gameplay transition cinematics and the proper full cinematics? What does it look like in the earliest version?
Great question. He's asking, what does the cinematic look like in really early production when we're stubbing everything in and when the designers are really going to work on laying out the level? We do black cards, for sure. Those are usually put in by the designer very early. That's even sometimes before we've even, on our team, started playing through the mission and feeling the beats of that. So that's a tool that they'll use to make sure that anybody playtesting is going to know that a cinematic is coming there. There are some times that we're able to get some kind of a 2D animatic in where it starts to at least have like a little bit of timing and some dialogue. I record a lot of scratch audio at the studio. I've played every female character in every one of our games. So we do that a lot. And then once we get our previews passed, we hook those up as quickly as possible because it really helps the designer with flow. And we always have to work with them. How do we come into this? How do we go out? Ins and outs, all that stuff. So yeah, there's definitely some black cards in the game at first.
Do you guys work with storyboard animators, or is it something you guys do?
It's really, on Ripped Apart, we really did everything in 3D. So it was all 3D previs. We didn't really have, I think sometimes designers would grab some concept art from our amazing concept artist, Dave Gerton, and I think we had a few others on the project, and sometimes that's used as visual representation, but we typically did all of our previs in 3D.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Closer we did. What time is it? Anybody? Okay, we have 10 minutes.
Hi, Lindsay.
Hi.
Oh, that's loud.
Hey, what's up, James?
So, you let us know that Rivet is one of your favorite characters.
Yeah.
What was your favorite animation that you did for Rivet and why?
Okay, and why? He's asking what my favorite animation I got to do with Rivet. It's actually, I think it is in that scene that I showed, just when she just mean mugs Clank after he giggles. Animating Clank giggling and her reaction to it was really fun. And it's all, like, it's me. Like, she is me. It was fun to relate to a character for once. My career has been full of, like, big hulking monsters and robots. So to actually feel like you get to put yourself into a character and she's smart and kind of sarcastic and all that stuff. So just anytime I get the chance to do a really funny facial expression on her was fun. And then I didn't actually get to animate, but I did get to lay out in previs our final scene of the game with Rivet and Kit having a moment. And I definitely cried a little bit the first time I saw the two of them in game with the beautiful sunset. So yeah, that scene was really special too.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Hi.
Hi. Oh, God.
Oh.
It's so loud. Sorry. Thank you so much. A really incredible talk. I'd love to hear you speak more on when your team is sort of whiteboarding out all of these different bespoke animations that they want to have happen in the background of a world. Mm-hmm. How do you go about like prioritizing what can be built out of everything they want to build?
Yeah.
And then how do you, as a lead, help like protect the motivation of your team when things that they want to do aren't able or just not in the production budget?
Yeah, that's a good question. They're asking about when, there's so much ideas and so many characters to work on, how do we parse that out of what gets in the game and what doesn't, and how do we protect the team and their intentions and making sure that that vision is seen? It's hard, and there are so many pitches on the cutting room floor that are really fun, but oftentimes in a game like this, you can get so creative and so many ideas. It's a well of creativity, and we do oftentimes think of things that are super fun, but they're not right for the world or right for the character necessarily, even though it's the most fun thing you've ever done or seen. So there's a lot of, does it fit into the world? Does it add to the game? Is the game okay without it? Obviously, when it comes to all those smaller NPC characters, the critical stuff is obviously the main moves that they have to be able to do, directional attacks, directional reacts, traversal, stuff like that. So that stuff definitely gets prioritized. But we do get to a stage, every character that can idle also has personality idles. So we make sure that, you have your basic standing, but what are they doing when they stand for a really long time? Everything gets something like that. And there's other characters that we realize that you see more. And so we put more time into those, knowing that the player is going to get to experience that a lot. And every now and then, you put a ton of work into there's some really fun pirate stuff that actually gets totally hidden by some of the weapons. we were like the squash and stretch and all this stuff, and you see it, and then there's just like a cloud of smoke. But you still feel it. You do see it. It's in the game. But you do that again is another reason why it's so important to get this stuff hooked up as quickly as possible to start seeing how often is the player going to interact with this. How often are they going to see this? Realizing that when these popcorn enemies show up, you kind of just take them out right away. So maybe they don't need idle flair, because how often are you going to stand and just watch them all hanging out in a field? So that's kind of a bummer sometimes, but we do try to make sure that anything somebody's really passionate about, that they're able to put it into the game. And that goes to reaching out to other departments and getting support. And we have a very supportive team this is cool, let's get this in the game. Let's get Spider-Cat in the game. So stuff like that. There are budgets, but if the team is really passionate about it, we'll try to make it work.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering how early you start working with the visual effects department, and what that kind of collaboration looks like. If you're under the same umbrella for trying to get things like the direction or the feeling or the timing of animations incorporated.
Yeah. So you're saying you work in visual effects?
I was curious how you kind of
How we work
collaborate.
with the visual effects department?
Between animation and visual effects.
Again, it's very collaborative. We oftentimes, as scenes are in their really early phase, we'll show a blocking pass to other departments, and we start talking about things that we'll need from other departments. So, you know, if we have a moment where a character's like moving and then like their arm catches on fire, we definitely have to work side by side, giving them, it's important for us to give them what they need, to do that. We have to make sure that they get our blocking pass as early as possible so that they can do their blocking pass. And then we refine side by side. A lot of people think that production is like step 1, writing. Step 2, then we block. It is, that's the path of game development. It's constantly passing stuff back and forth and back and forth, and I changed that arm, so now you gotta change that fire, I'm sorry. And we locked that, and no, we're unlocking it. Yeah, it's non-linear, and it's hopefully you're getting each team of the department kind of working on the different various phases together and going back and forth and, you know, all of that stuff. So yeah, it's definitely not linear.
Cool, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Hey, I have a question. How much animators are involved in playtesting? And if you would be able to say if all the team basically finished the game, like played the whole thing.
And played the whole thing?
Yeah.
So he's asking like how many animators are involved in playtesting, and do I know if the whole team played the whole game? During production, we're always playing the game, so we are always playtesting, whether it's not official or not. We're constantly, it's really important for us to get in the game. Gameplay animators especially are constantly playing their levels, making sure that things are placed correctly, working with design, and that everything looks right. And then cinematics, it's really important for us to see how these things are flowing from gameplay in and out, and then especially those transitional cinematics. Those are high action, those should not slow you down or bog you down. And so we have to make sure that that's feeling good. As for the team playing the whole game, I definitely didn't play the whole game during production, but I totally platinumed it after it came out. Cool. And it was really fun. That was my first platinum ever on any game. I just really had fun playing it. So yeah, I think I would say probably like designers were close, yeah. Yeah, designers definitely play, you know, we're just like in the animation world sometimes, so yeah, all of that, but yes, I played the game.
Cool, thanks.
I think, is that it? Are we good? Thank you guys so much. This was really scary, but it was really fun. So I think I might be in another room to do follow-up, and rate and review me. I don't know, smash that subscribe button. I think there's something in your passes. So, but thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.